Hello, my lovely listeners. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, where we educate, enlighten, and entertain. The opinions of the guests may not represent those of the host or of the station. Folks, you're going to want to pull up a chair and listen to this podcast. I am so super excited. I don't believe in coincidences, folks. I was meant to meet my guests via the internet. If you are grieving a situation, if you're grieving a loss of a person, a job, you need to listen to my guest. This book, I'm going to tell you right now, run and buy it. It's Unraveling Grief, A Mother's Spiritual Journey of Healing and Discovery by Meghan Smith Brooks. I want to welcome Meghan to Chatting with Betsy, and I want to thank you, Meghan, for sending me this book, writing what you did in it, and for helping so many people by writing this wonderful book that, folks, I can't even give this book away because I have to refer to it when I'm in my down spot. You really need to buy it, but please listen to this podcast of my guest, Meghan. Thank you, Meghan, for coming on Chatting with Betsy.
Oh, thank you, Betsy. I'm really honored to be here, and I really deeply appreciate the connection we've already had with each other. And thank you so much for your wonderful endorsement of my book, because I wrote it from the depth of my heart to really support anyone that is experiencing the impact of grief, and to know that it doesn't have to destroy you, that there's a wonderful opportunity as we move through the healing process, and that we can survive it. And I offer some tools and practices, and so I want to be here to support people, and I appreciate this opportunity to share with you today.
Well, you are welcome, Meghan, and even though we're not done with the interview yet, I definitely want you back, especially in October before a holiday time, to discuss coping with grieving during the holidays. It's tough. And I have to, I ask you this because I ask every guest this, and I know why you wrote the book. But your book helped me. I lost my husband last year. I lost my brother this year. So your book came at an opportune time. And your philosophies, like how you feel, I definitely connect to, because it's how I feel. And we need to talk about grieving and dying and get it out in the open and learn to discuss it. So I want to ask you what I ask every person who writes a book is, why did you, I know why you wrote it, but can you tell the audience why you wrote it and what you want them to take away from it?
Okay, well, that's a lot. And, I just want to confirm, too, that one of the reasons was because I realized how important it is that we get grief out into the open, into our conversations, to not avoid it, to not, because it's an awkward conversation, an awkward topic, and because it stirs up so much of us. And if we're carrying any unresolved grief, which most of us do carry some because we aren't taught how to process it, how to use it in our life, anything significant like the death of a loved one triggers all that and adds to it and can make it even a more profoundly painful experience. So I realized how important it is to have the courage to get out and talk about it. My experience of the most deep, profound, and heart-wrenching form of grief came for me when my youngest son, I have two sons, Justin was 29 years old, and he was murdered on May 30th, 2013. I didn't find out until about a week later. When I wasn't able to reach him, I was about ready to embark on a cruise that was a conference at sea with 500 colleagues in ministry. And I was concerned that I wasn't able to reach him, but I left him a message. And as I arrived in baggage claim in Fort Lauderdale, I traveled across country all day. I had my cell phone off, and my firstborn son, Ryan, called me. The phone started ringing and said, "Mom, I've been trying to reach you all day. Are you sitting down?" And, you know, when somebody says that to you, you're like, oh, my God, this is not going to be good news. And, you know, it's just like, what? Tell me what happened. And he said, Mom, Justin's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean he's gone? He goes, Mom, he's dead. They found his body in the river, and they don't know what happened. You know, and so at that time, my heart just stopped. I didn't know if I could take my next breath. Your mind goes into denial. It's like, I didn't hear that they had to make a mistake. But eventually the information started to come through, and found out that it wasn't an accident, that he had been intentionally killed by a violent act. He was shot 3 times, and his body had been wrapped in a heavy chain attached to a cinder block and thrown into a river with the hopes that he would never be found. And
I am so sorry, Meghan. My profound sympathies, even though it's, you know, a few years ago, but you're a courageous woman to write this book and tell your story. So go ahead.
Well, you know, what came to be is that I felt like I was compelled to write this. It was part of my healing process, that I felt like my son's soul was connecting with me. And as a matter of fact, I have my last picture of the two of us together. I have it sitting with me right now. And he was with me as I wrote this book to tell his story and to try to make a difference. And it was something that I could not do. You know, it was like there was a point where if I didn't get it out, my healing wouldn't have been complete. And as I began to heal and navigate it, I realized that, one, I was grateful that I had a spiritual foundation. I'm an ordained unity minister, and I was serving a spiritual community at the time. So I had a foundation of how to work through things, but not where I've had to walk through it myself. It was more supporting others. So that was a very different situation. And I started to observe how I was feeling, how it impacted me, and how other people responded to me. And as I noticed that, I was able to recognize how important it is that we talk about it, because people were awkward, they were uncomfortable. It reminded them of their own grief that they didn't want to talk about and would try to avoid it. And it's a very, very difficult thing, but, you know, it's a part of the human experience. None of us get out of escaping some form of pain and loss in life, right?
That's right.
So how do we deal with it? That's what I wanted to address. That's why I felt like this had become my mission. And
it is a great mission that I so appreciate. You know, I just have to say this. My mom, God bless her, is 90. Well, will be 91 this month. And my brother died in January. My mom didn't see my dad die. She saw my brother die. And I tried to tell her, you know, that's traumatic, just like it was traumatic for me to see my husband die, even though I've seen other people die. This was my husband. This is your son. Mm-hmm. But in the era that she grew up, you didn't talk about your feelings. You didn't talk about grieving. You didn't talk of, you know, you packed up their things and you weren't even allowed to mention their name. And
it's about just getting over it.
Yes,
just get over
exactly.
it and move on with life. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And
the thing
of course,
we don't get over it. We don't.
Exactly. I was going to say that. Yes, we don't.
Yeah, and you can't avoid it. You can't, you know, just kind of feel like you have to, you know, walk around it or go under it or over it, or, you know, it's going to always be there. And the only way to heal and move forward and thrive in life is to have the courage to go through it. And so how do we do that is what we haven't been taught.
Exactly. Yes. How do we can you give some examples of how we get through the grieving process? Because grieving will always be part of us forever. But how, like, what do you recommend? And folks, I'm telling you, I just have to put this here. Get this book, because there's great examples. There's great suggestions on how to get through the grieving process, which really has helped me tremendously. Go ahead, Meghan.
Well, one of the things I think first and foremost is to really understand what grief is. That it's not just I have had this loss and that's, and so I'm feeling the pain in my heart. That's obvious. But to know that grief really consumes all of what we are. I found an interesting definition of it that said that grief takes up residence in your physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions of life. So it affects every part of you. And when I was processing that for myself to go, well, what does grief really do to you? I had this revelation, and I'm just going to read this little piece from my book as a setup for what we can do, is that my experience is that grief slowly creeps into every part of us. It infiltrates our thoughts, our feelings. It seeps into our emotions, and it crawls into our hearts. It finds its way into the cells of our body, and it takes over how it functions. It finds its way into every aspect of our lives, our relationships, how we respond to the world around us, our behaviors, our perception of life on every level. And in time, we can't even recognize ourselves as grief has taken up residence in who we are. So one of the first things that is important for us to do is to first acknowledge my heart is broken. And to be gentle with ourselves enough to care for ourselves, for our needs. It's like, listen to what your body's saying, what your heart is saying. What do I need in this moment? How am I feeding my broken heart? Because processing the energy of grief takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot out of us. That's why we feel fatigued. That's why we feel like I can't hardly get up and get through the day, because I'm processing so much at a deep emotional level. So what we feed our bodies, is fuel for us to function. Is it highly nutritional, whole foods that have, real vibrational nutrition for us? Or am I just feeding myself with, junk food and sugar? That's not going to help. Am I allowing myself to rest when I need to? Am I asking for help? Have the courage to ask for what you need. For the people that care, that are just waiting because they don't know what to do, just say, would you just sit with me? Or I need to talk about this. Or could you just come over and we'll watch a movie together? Whatever it is, it's like, what do I need to care for me? Just like we would, I thought about it as like as a mother, how we care for our little children. We would be willing to do anything for them, to nurture them and love them and know. So how can we do that for ourselves when we're dealing with pain and loss and the depths of heartache? And then once we start to get through that, I find that the first initial phase of healing grief is that it's like, well, for me, it was like I was smacked right out of my body, that I wasn't in touch with who I was. It was like I was watching myself go through life as an observer, like I was watching somebody else's life as a movie, and I wasn't really, couldn't really even feel. I was just numb. I had nightmares where I couldn't sleep because when I closed my eyes, I would start imagining what my son's last moments of life were like, and it was a horror show. And so it takes time for our body to come to the place where we can start to accept what's happened. And when we're ready to accept it, then that's the beginning of being able to move forward. And also where it's important to be able to willing to feel as deeply as possible the depth of the pain. We must feel to heal. And that's one of the things that I offer in the book is some of the ways to do that. I have guided meditation links that you can access through the book to help you to have the courage to get raw with it. I call it to regurgitate it, throw it up. It's an ugly, ugly process, but it's really important so that we don't have any of that residual energy that continues to blindside us moving forward. And only then can we begin to heal and begin to see that there is a value in what grief offers us in learning to know a new aspect of who we are that we might not ever have taken the time to know before. And that's the part of, I don't recognize who I am. So if I try to be who I was, I'm going to continue to hold myself back from healing. So the healing process is really coming to terms with who am I now and how do I move forward to thrive as I honor my loss, as I honor the one that I mourn in my heart. It's a gradual process.
That is so on target, Meghan. It's, when I lost my husband and Josh, our son, was grieving also, the things that people would say to us just threw me, like I couldn't even believe it. And, we don't know how people feel. And I had to say this because I know someone who lost their 2 children. I would never, ever say to someone, I know how you feel, because I don't. If you've never lost a child, if you never lost a spouse, don't tell someone you know how they feel, because you don't. And everyone's grief is different, even if you did have, an experience where you lost a child or a spouse. Everyone feels differently. But I do know this, and I'll share this, Meghan. Since I lost my husband, I am more, I would say, empathetic to someone who lost a spouse than I ever was before. I can now relate to them because I've gone through it myself. And now I lost a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's very true.
Yeah. Excuse me. A hairstylist I went to, she lost her son in some kind of accident right after Thanksgiving 2019. And when I went back to her, I hugged her. And I said, I'm very sorry, Lisa. I wanted the elephant to get out of the room by addressing it. And I told her, I said, I can't tell you how I feel, or, because I don't. And I said, I know that, I'm sorry for your pain and sorrow, is what I said to her.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, our natural feeling is we want to be able to reach out and comfort someone. And we're so at a loss for words. I do remember somebody saying to me, I don't know what to say. And I realized in the moment, it's like, well, I don't know what to say either. So it's okay. The fact that you care matters.
Right. And I think people should be taught, like, what to say or maybe what not to say. But the feeling that people get when we're grieving is that when you walk into the room, it's like you're the plague. People are not comfortable around people that are grieving. And Elisa told me, people say to me, you'll get over this. And she said, time will heal all wounds. She goes, I'll never get over this. And I said, you're right, Lisa. You won't get over this. How can you?
No, it's really coming to terms with how to live with it. Because you will, we will get triggered over and over again in different ways. And yes, in time, it's like what I recognize is that I've been able to learn to live with it in a way that pain, that sorrow is a part of who I am. And so not trying to push it away or trying to make it go away, but I honor it for what it is, because it reminds us of our capacity to love. And if I didn't love so deeply, I wouldn't have grieved so deeply. And so that in itself is a gift, that I have this capacity to love. And so having the courage to say things, and when somebody says an awkward or uncomfortable or inappropriate thing, I realize that it's not necessarily intentional, but it's because they don't know what to say. I would try to lovingly readdress it and say, I know this is a hard thing to talk about, so maybe we should. How can we be more direct about it? And as you said, nobody's grief is the same. You can't just put it in a box and say that's how it is. Everyone's situation is unique to their own self, but pain is pain. And so we want to support and honor people in any way that we can. And so I encourage people to have the courage to ask for what they need, to tell people, because a lot of times there's people that are just waiting because they don't know what to do. But it's kind of a weird thing, but in a sense I've come to think that grief becomes my friend because it reminds me of what I've learned about myself, having the courage to know myself, and my capacity for loving. And that's a good thing.
That's beautiful, Meghan. That's really a great way to address a grief and to look at it. And that helped me. Like I would try to, the more I tried to not be sad, the more sad I became, until I just said, you know what, I'm going to address my feelings of sadness and embrace it and then move on. And, of course, some days are better than others, and holidays and birthdays and special occasions will always trigger our grieving. Excuse me.
One of the other things that I wrote about is to make friends with our tears, to not be afraid of our tears, to not push them away, because tears are a form of cleansing, of releasing. It's a necessary part of the process. So I allowed myself to just let the tears flow unrestricted, not trying to hold them back or make excuses for them, but you just let it the wetness just drain all over my face and drip all over my clothes and get as messy as possible. But it's such a freedom and a release when you allow yourself to do that. It's really powerful. And when you can model that for others, you might want to, have the really deep cleansing cry on your own. But it also helps them, gives them permission to release their own pain and to be more comfortable with letting the tears be a natural part of expressing our feelings. This is a part of who we are.
Absolutely. And I think men, boys, men in society need to learn to do this, and for people to accept the fact it's okay for a man to cry, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. I would get so annoyed and mad when people would say to my son, be strong for your mother. Or, Betsy, be strong for Josh. I'm like, no, don't tell Josh to be strong for me. I don't want him to be strong for me. I want him to feel however he feels.
Absolutely. It's like you love each other through that. That's one of the deepest bonds my older son Ryan and I have connected through our mutual loss of his brother and my baby boy. That Justin was born December 14th, and the family joke was he was born just in time for Christmas, which he didn't like that joke, but it it reminds us of that. And one of my most profound moments with Ryan was after the memorial service that we held for Justin, is the two of us just holding each other and crying, just sobbing, into each other and just feeling that connection of mutual loss and love. It was so profound.
Yes, I agree. When we go to the cemetery, if we go outside, weather permitting, sometimes we both cry. And I said, that's okay, Josh. It's okay if we cry every time we come here. And sometimes we stay in the car and we say hi. I mean, I talk to my husband all the time. And we, say, hey, Matt, or hey, Dad, we're here, we love you, we miss you. I wanted my son to be able to express his grief. And it's so important for children, no matter what their age, because, our babies are always our babies, no matter how old they are, to be able to grieve. And I do you have any suggestions for parents on how to deal with children that are grieving loss of a sibling or their dad, or mom, or grandparent, or whoever it is?
Well, I think it's important that we do have a conversation, because what we're doing is modeling something from our children so that they know how to process pain and loss and grief as they grow up. But to do it in a way that is the language that's understandable and appropriate for a child. And I think that a child can understand the word sadness, and I really, that you miss someone. And as a matter of fact, I'm in the process of writing a children's book on grief, and I did it with a little story of a frog that was noticing a butterfly flying by, and that the butterfly was sad. And when the frog asked the butterfly, he said, "Well, why are you sad?" "Well, I'm missing my friend Caterpillar, and I don't know where Caterpillar went." And so the frog sent the butterfly to the wise owl to understand what happened. And ultimately it is, using that analogy of the transformation of life, that caterpillars always become a butterfly, but they don't know it in the process. So the butterfly doesn't recognize what's happened to the caterpillar. And so the wise owl just said to know that your friend Caterpillar is always in your heart, that Caterpillar will always be with you. You haven't lost him. He just changed form. And so
that's
I think
beautiful.
a child can understand that, and that, whatever we're missing, whatever we love, whatever we can't see and hold in the physical anymore, doesn't mean it's lost to us forever. It's always in our heart. The treasured memories. And so talking to a child about, well, what's your favorite memory about grandma, or, or your kitten, or, whatever it is. And it's like we can shift then from our focus on what we can't have, what we've lost, to the memories that we hold in our heart that no one could take from us. And I think a child can relate to that. So whenever they say they're sad, it's like, acknowledge it. It's like, I'm sad too. But what is it we remember about, this person that we love? And somehow we can shift to the place where we're smiling and laughing about it. And I think that's helpful for them.
Yes, that's great suggestions. Thank you so much. Meghan, I can't believe our time is up. You are a blessing. I would love to have you on again. You have so much to offer. Can you please tell people how they can get in touch with you, or where they can purchase your book?
My book is available on Amazon in paperback and in Kindle form. I'm hoping to have an audio version soon. Ran into some little technical glitches on that, but it's in the process. And my website is, www.unravelinggrief.com. It has all the information about my book and also my grief coaching program, and I have an online grief coaching course that's available as a self-paced process of taking the material from the book and going deeper into healing and navigating grief, and ultimately finding the meaningful way of moving forward to thrive, because it's possible that we can do that. So that's my gift to everyone, and there are links from the book that offer guided meditations that are part of the healing process as well.
Thank you. Thank you for writing this book, Meghan. I can understand it being part of your healing process, and I thank you for writing the book and connecting with me, because your book was a blessing to me. Folks, if you missed any of this podcast, you can listen to it again wherever you hear your favorite podcasts. I am on Spotify, Spreaker, Google, just to name 3 of them. Please read the blog. It will have the information that Meghan gave today's interview. I want to thank Jeannie White, station manager of Passionate World Talk Radio Network, who produces the show and writes the blog. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Thank you, ladies, for all the work that you do. Folks, I can't say this enough. you have to acknowledge your grieving and go buy Meghan's book. And I can't say that enough. You might say, Betsy, say that about everyone who writes a book. This was personal for me. I am grieving. You know, if anyone listens to my show, you know I'm grieving. I lost my husband. I lost my brother this year. And this book came at a time where I really needed it, and it helped me. And this book will help you too. And please connect with Meghan. And Meghan, you're going to be writing another book about people telling their stories.
Yes, so it'll be Unraveling Grief, other people's stories to rediscover hope. I haven't quite got the refined title yet, but it's I want to help people know that we can also heal through other people's stories, to be willing to share them with each other, not from a place of trying to get, to be the victim or try to find a benefit from sharing your story, but in inspiring others to say, this is how I got through it. This is what worked for me. We all have stories that can make a difference for each other, and that's what I want to be able to share in my next book.
Well, I'm looking forward to that book, and I actually hope to be part of it if I could get my act together. And when you had that book published, please come on, and we will talk about it. Your children's book, I would love to promote that on Chatting with Betsy.
Well, thank you. I'm working on the illustrations now. I'm trying to be brave enough to create my own, but if not, I'll find the perfect artist. And it's just, finding the different ways to support each other. And so I appreciate this time to share and be with you, and hope that Unraveling Grief, a mother's spiritual journey of healing and discovery, can make a difference in other people's lives too.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. And folks, all I can say is from my own personal experience that Matt's journey brought me to where I am today. If it wasn't, I get emotional. If it wasn't for Matt, my husband, I would not be doing Chatting with Betsy. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I want to thank your son, Justin, and in his memory that you wrote this book to help other people. And I'm doing what I'm doing to help other people. So I so understand that. And would you mind if I dedicate the show to your son, Justin?
Oh, I'd be so honored. Thank you. That really touches my heart. Looking at his picture, his beautiful blue eyes just smiling back at us right now. Thank you so much.
So, Justin, this show is dedicated to you, your life, and your memory. And your mom wrote a beautiful book, which is going to help so many people. So I thank you, Meghan, for coming on and just sharing your book and your journey. You are a blessing, and I wish you the best. And, folks, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy, and Passionate World Talk Radio Network. Bye-bye now.